Hey everyone, welcome to week 6. This video is to talk about our readings for the week and give you an idea of where we're heading for the quiz and the writing prompt, and to return to the Olympics once again as the main platform for our stories. And really this week revolves around the story of 3 or 4 people really: Tommy Smith, John Carlos, also Peter Norman, and Muhammad Ali. But it's really to bring our lenses onto a moment in the history of black activism in sport at the world stage, right? Because Muhammad Ali, while was a person concerned with racial politics at home, very much so, also throughout his career had a very international outlook, both for the significance of the civil rights struggle in the United States, but also for his place as a black man in the world, especially in his interactions with Africa, which is something that those of you who are watching When We Were Kings, fantastic film that I think all of you should watch, but those who are writing about it are going to particularly enjoy, really comes out in that film. And so I hope you started with the Hartman reading. It's maybe the most difficult reading we've had in class because Hartman's really playing with some sociological concepts and some theories on racial dynamics that may have been a bit of a slog to get through. But his ultimate point is that this image of Tommy Smith and John Carlos at the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City, there's something that he noticed as a person interested in sports history. It was an image that really resonated with people, especially with young black people in America, but even in African American communities where Tommy Smith and John Carlos's stories really came out of, not a lot of people, or a surprising amount of people, did not know what it meant, and what it meant in the terms of the 2 actors who were on the podium, right? And his book is a phenomenal book. We don't get to read the whole thing for the class, but it's really a story about how a wider movement, the Olympic Project for Human Rights, and a tradition of African American academics looking at inequities in sport set the stage for something like that gesture. And I'm not calling it a Black Power salute or a salute or a Black Power fist on purpose, because while those terms have been ascribed to that action, it's not the terms that neither Tommy Smith or John Carlos were thinking of when they did it. Although it certainly had a lot to do with why it would occur to them to do that kind of thing in the first place, right? So it's not apart from these things, but it's not exactly that, right? And so it's complicated. It's really complicated, and that's what I really like about Hartman's reading, is that he dives into the complexity of the story. It's not just about what the media at the time or after said, or even what other academics, other researchers, sociologists, historians have said about the event. He's really trying to take seriously the idea that these were 2 men who had different reasons for doing it, not even great friends with each other, but who were also a part of a wider movement that they sometimes agreed with and sometimes disagreed with. And it's that kind of complexity within activism that I think is really important to understand about the African American experience of activism in sports, which is really what this week is about through these stories. So make sure you're reading that Hartman piece carefully. Make sure you try and take apart the places where he really is signposting explicitly for you what the reading is going to do and what his main points are. Because at certain times he's talking about what media portrayals were, and at other times he's talking about his own interpretation. And at other times he's talking about even the own contradictions within someone like John Carlos's narration of what happened and the reasons for doing it. So that's a great reading. I hope you enjoy it. It is a little bit difficult. Then we have Oriard on Muhammad Ali. And just like Hartman, we get like some really complicated commentary on, or some commentary on the complicated nature of Muhammad Ali's image, right? And how, as a boxer, Ali's performances were really important to how he was portrayed in the media, of course, but also what the meaning of that portrayal was at a wider moment in American history, right? That he called himself pretty, for example, is something that Oriard talks about explicitly as being something that maybe only Muhammad Ali could do. And then his conversion and the moment in which we begin calling him Muhammad Ali as kind of an important moment for his career, obviously, but also in his media portrayals. The post-1970s story of his career and the kind of activism he was involved with and the kind of statements he made about the United States' foreign policy in places like Vietnam, but also on the state of race relations in the United States. And then kind of a shorter, easier piece, not a perfect piece about Peter Norman, but one that at least is explicitly about him and the right size for this class. So there's more to that story, and those of you who are interested can ask me about it or can do some research online to find out about it. But really another remarkable story about an Australian sprinter and what his significance was within the 1968 actions taken by Tommy Smith and John Carlos. So those are the main themes that I'm hoping you can hone in on as you take notes throughout the readings. Pay attention, as always, to what the arguments of the authors are and how they're supporting those arguments. So make sure you're highlighting the points where they really come out explicitly and say that. And then let's take a look at the prompt itself. So this week we're asking, the question is, in what ways do the stories of Tommy Smith, John Carlos, and Muhammad Ali illustrate a specific kind of activism by African American athletes in the 1960s and 70s? When did their performances as athletes matter most? So what I'm looking for you to tell me about there is, in these two stories about these three men, tell me what it is that you can group their kind of activism under. Is it a revolt of the black athlete, as Doug Hartman's book is titled? Is Muhammad Ali's story very different from the kind of activism that Smith and Carlos were undertaking? You don't have any readings that are really giving you meat to grapple with the differences or similarities between the two, so I'm leaving it up to you to draw those on your own. But what kind of activism by African American athletes can you group these under? How would you describe that? What were the goals of this kind of activism? What were the goals of Smith and Carlos at 68 versus more of a career long snapshot you get from Oriard on Ali? And then when did their performance as athletes matter most? So tell me about where it was important. Why did it matter that Tommy Smith and John Carlos placed in the medals? Why did it matter that Ali's career had the trajectory that it did? So there you can tell me a little bit what you've learned about what these guys actually did as athletes and how it tied to their efforts as activists. If you have any questions about the content, feel free to send me a question. Make sure